There is something most men over 50 do within the first 30 seconds of waking up. Takes no effort. Feels completely harmless. And for most men, it has become so automatic that they don't even register doing it. But according to what we now understand about male vascular health and hormonal rhythm, that single behavior, lasting no more than 25 seconds, may be quietly working against your sexual performance every single day. Not in a dramatic, overnight way. In the slow, invisible way that compounds over months and years until one day you notice that something has shifted, and you can't quite explain when it started. Today we're going to talk about what that mistake is, why it matters physiologically, and what you can replace it with starting tomorrow morning. Stay with me through this entire video. The correction is simple, but you need the full picture to understand why it works. If you're finding value already, hit like and keep watching. What comes next may change how you start every single day. Let's begin with something most men were never taught about their own biology. The moment you open your eyes in the morning, your body is in the middle of one of the most important hormonal windows of the entire day. In the minutes surrounding waking, your body naturally produces a surge of cortisol. This is not the destructive cortisol of chronic stress. This is the alerting cortisol, the kind that tells your cardiovascular system to begin pressurizing, signals your adrenal glands to start producing androgens, and sets the metabolic tone for the next several hours. This window is sometimes called the cortisol awakening response. It is brief, it is powerful, and it is exquisitely sensitive to disruption. At the same time, your body is completing its overnight testosterone production cycle. Studies in endocrinology have consistently observed that testosterone levels in men are typically at their highest point in the early morning hours. The body uses the deep sleep window to synthesize and release it. By the time you wake up, that hormonal environment is already in place, waiting to be either preserved or undermined by what happens in the first few minutes of your day. Now here is where the mistake enters. Within seconds of waking, the vast majority of men reach for their phone. Not to call someone, not to check something urgent. It happens reflexively, almost automatically. The hand moves before the mind fully engages. The screen lights up, and in those 25 seconds, something begins to shift inside your body that most men have never connected to their sexual health. Here is the physiological sequence. The moment your eyes receive the bright, blue-spectrum light from a phone screen in a darkened or semi-dark room, your visual cortex sends a signal that your brain interprets as high-urgency environmental input. This is ancient wiring. Your nervous system does not distinguish between a glowing screen and a threat at the edge of your field of vision. To your subcortical stress architecture, light plus immediate cognitive loading equals alerting response. Cortisol, instead of following its natural graduated arc, spikes sharply. The awakening response, which should unfold over 15 to 20 minutes with a gentle elevation, gets hijacked. You receive a compressed, jagged version of it. This matters for sexual function because cortisol and testosterone operate in a relationship of opposition. When cortisol climbs sharply and unnaturally, the downstream production of testosterone precursors is suppressed at the adrenal level. The same steroidogenic pathway that produces cortisol is the one that feeds androgen synthesis. Under acute cortisol pressure, the body prioritizes the stress hormone. The androgens take a secondary position. Over a single morning, this effect is modest. Over 300 mornings, it is not modest at all. There is a second mechanism, and this one is vascular. Sexual performance in men is fundamentally a blood flow event. Erections depend on the dilation of penile vasculature, which is regulated primarily by nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule produced by the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels, and it is acutely sensitive to the same sympathetic nervous system activation that your phone triggers at waking. When the sympathetic system activates sharply in the morning, as it does when you begin processing information, reading headlines, checking messages, feeling the first pull of obligation, blood preferentially shifts toward your muscles and away from peripheral and reproductive vasculature. This is a survival response. Your body is preparing to act, not to reproduce. That redirection of vascular tone, repeated morning after morning, appears to contribute to a pattern researchers have described as endothelial conditioning toward sympathetic dominance. In plain language, your blood vessels begin to default to a contracted, guarded posture rather than the relaxed, open posture that sexual function requires. Evidence in vascular medicine suggests that the endothelium responds to habitual stimuli. What you train it to expect, it begins to provide automatically. Subscribe now so you don't miss the corrective protocol coming up in the next 2 minutes. Takes no supplements and no equipment. Now let's talk about what you replace it with. The goal is not to throw your phone across the room or adopt an extreme morning routine. The goal is to protect that first window, those critical 15 to 20 minutes after waking, so that your hormonal and vascular environment has a chance to initialize correctly. Here is a practical protocol built around what the physiology is actually asking for. First, do not pick up the phone for the first 10 minutes after waking. Keep it face down, across the room, or simply make the decision the night before by placing it out of arm's reach from your bed. The barrier doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to interrupt the automatic reflex long enough for your nervous system to orient without external loading. Second, breathe before you move. Before standing up, take 6 to 8 slow, deliberate breaths with extended exhales. Exhale longer than you inhale. This single action activates the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic nervous system, which is the branch responsible for vascular dilation and the physiological state from which sexual arousal is possible. You are not meditating. You are running a biological reset that takes under 90 seconds. Third, expose yourself to natural light within the first 5 minutes of being up. Open a window, step onto a balcony, or stand near a glass door. Natural morning light triggers the appropriate cortisol awakening response through the correct photoreceptor pathway. It synchronizes your circadian system, which regulates testosterone release timing, without the sympathetic jolt of screen light. Fourth, drink water before anything else. Overnight, you lose a significant volume of fluid through respiration alone. Mild dehydration impairs blood viscosity and endothelial function. Nitric oxide production depends on adequate hydration at the cellular level. A large glass of water within 5 minutes of waking is not a wellness cliché. It is a vascular intervention. Fifth, avoid checking news, messages, or social content until after you have eaten or engaged in at least 20 minutes of morning movement. Information that generates an emotional response, frustration, urgency, comparison, drives cortisol upward through a cognitive pathway entirely separate from the light mechanism. Protecting your information environment in the morning is protecting your hormonal environment. Sixth, if you have access to morning sunlight and a few minutes, a brief walk outside within the first 30 minutes after waking has shown meaningful associations with improvements in testosterone rhythm, mood regulation, and vascular tone. You do not need to exercise intensively. You need movement in natural light, which sends a powerful synchronizing signal to the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, the hormonal command chain that governs testosterone production. Let's bring this together. The 25-second mistake is not exotic. It is reaching for your phone before your hormonal and vascular systems have had a chance to initialize correctly. It disrupts the cortisol awakening response, suppresses androgen production through the shared steroidogenic pathway, and conditions your vascular endothelium towards sympathetic tone rather than the relaxed, dilated state that sexual performance depends on. The correction does not require any product, supplement, or significant change to your schedule. It requires only that you protect the first 10 to 15 minutes of your morning from the one stimulus most likely to undermine the biology that is trying to serve you. Men over 50 have a narrower margin for hormonal and vascular error than they did at 30. That is not a reason for alarm. It is a reason for precision. And precision, in this case, is simply a matter of understanding what your body is doing when you first wake up, and choosing not to interrupt it. The difference between a man who addresses this and one who doesn't may not be visible in a single week. But over months, the trajectory diverges significantly. The physiology does not lie. Check the pinned link below, it goes deeper into everything we covered here. If this video made you look at your morning differently, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay with this channel because the next video goes into the specific nutrients that support nitric oxide production and what most men over 50 are chronically deficient in without ever knowing it. Until then, protect your mornings. Your biology is counting on the first 15 minutes more than you know.